a story of power, fragility, and hope. We often look at the past with nostalgia, a place, a face, a memory. But for most people in human history, life was brutal. Today, life is better, but fragile. We often look at the past with nostalgia, a place, a face, a memory. But for most people in human history, life was brutal. Today, life is better, but fragile. I'm Layton, and on Renaissance Spirit, we explore history not to romanticize it, but to learn how to protect what we've built, and what we're on the verge of losing. Today we'll give you a narrative history of what life was like in the past, why it's better now for most people, why we need to keep it that way, and the mounting trials we face, including climate change, a fragile American economy, crumbling governance, and a man in the Oval Office more concerned with what was than what could be. This is a direct argument against the hollow nostalgia of Make America Great Again. But to understand where we are and what's at stake, we must begin where we all began. History's warnings are clear. Our choices shape the future. Ancient city-states, built with immense labor, remind us of the power and fragility of human endeavors. As the sun sets on their achievements, we must heed their lessons. For millennia, human life was a brutal endurance test. The Paleolithic world offered no safety net, no shelter beyond what you could build with your hands, and no food beyond what you could hunt, gather, or scavenge. Every day, survival hung on the edge of chance and instinct. Disease could wipe out entire clans. A simple injury meant death. And perhaps most hauntingly, memory was fleeting. Stories carried by mouth, easily lost. But humanity's great power is adaptation. Around 10,000 BCE, we planted the first seeds, literally and figuratively, in the Fertile Crescent, giving rise to Mesopotamia's towering ziggurats, the first written language, cuneiform, and codified laws. Civilization took root. Ancient Egypt dazzled with its monumental pyramids, but its greatness rested on the shoulders of forced laborers and rigid class hierarchies. Ancient Greece gave us democracy, but only for an elite few, while slavery and misogyny persisted. The philosophers pondered virtue, the enslaved built their temples. Then came Rome, the mightiest empire the world had known. Rome gave us roads, law, and the dream of civic virtue. But for every marble arch, there were chains on a slave's wrists. For every grand Senate debate, a conquered province bled. When Rome fell, the chaos that followed wasn't just the collapse of empire, it was the collapse of an idea that humans could build something larger than themselves and make it last. The medieval period tried to restore order, but Europe froze into feudal rigidity. Yet even here, seeds of change took root. Monasteries copied ancient texts. Universities were founded. Gothic cathedrals rose. Still, kings and lords reigned at the top. Peasants toiled in desperation below. And then, death arrived. The Black Plague from 1347 to 1351 was both horror and harbinger. 1/3 of Europe perished, but paradoxically, the aftermath brought the first cracks in feudalism, a truth that ends with all pandemics change. With so many dead, labor became valuable. Serfs could negotiate, peasants could finally move. Knowledge, locked away in monasteries, began to flow again. Out of pestilence rose the Renaissance, the namesake of this channel, was a rebirth of reason, compassion, inquiry, art, science, and rediscovery of the ancient world's wisdom. But even in that rebirth, power was uneven. Popes, princes, and potentates schemed not just in palaces, but across oceans. As the Renaissance flourished in Europe, conquest flourished across the globe. European powers, armed with new technologies, sailed outward and enslaved entire continents. The 17th and 18th centuries saw the rise of colonial empires, with Africa carved up, South America plundered, and Asia subjugated. The human cost was staggering. The transatlantic slave trade alone transported over 12 million Africans into chains and death. Meanwhile, imperial power devoured its own. In Ireland during the Great Famine from 1845 to 1852, over 1 million people died, while British ships exported food from the same soil that starved its people. This was not just mismanagement, historian Tim Pat Coogan writes, it was genocide by indifference. The world was brutal, unequal, and for the masses short and cruel. And then came the machine. The Industrial Revolution swept across Britain and then the world, changing everything. Factories churned out textiles, steel, and weapons. Cities exploded in size. The rhythm of life shifted from sun and seasons to shifts and schedules. The steam engine shrank continents. Electricity illuminated nights once dark, but the revolution's promise came with deep poison. Children worked 16-hour days in mines. Factory workers lost limbs to machines. Entire rivers ran black with waste. The aristocracy grew richer, while slums in Manchester, Birmingham, and Chicago became fetid pits of disease and despair. Globally, imperial powers wielded industrial might to tighten their grip. Railroads weren't built for the benefit of colonized peoples, but to more efficiently extract their resources. India's textile industry was systematically dismantled by the British. Belgian rule in the Congo led to the deaths of millions. Industrialization made life faster, richer, and more interconnected, but also more alienated, more fragile, and more violent. On the horizon loomed war on a scale humanity had never imagined. Stop for a moment. Look around. How many things in your daily life, comfort, power, connectivity, came from that promise, and at what price? World War I was not inevitable, but it was predictable. The Industrial Revolution's mass production had armed the great powers with deadly tools, and in the trenches of the Western Front, those tools were unleashed. Machine guns shredded flesh, poison gas choked lungs. Artillery left craters where men once stood. When the guns fell silent in 1918, the world was broken. Entire generations of young men were gone. But the world learned nothing. The Treaty of Versailles planted the seeds of resentment and vengeance. And then the Spanish flu and the rebuilding of Germany. World War II was merely the next convulsion, a darker, more mechanized apocalypse. The Holocaust industrialized murder itself. Bombers flattened cities. Hiroshima and Nagasaki became warnings written in ash. And yet, even from that darkness, humanity tried again. The post-World War II era saw unprecedented prosperity in the West. The Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe. The GI Bill educated millions of Americans. Unions thrived. The middle class grew. But this golden age was uneven. Jim Crow still ruled the South. Women's roles were constrained. Colonialism limped on. The Industrial Revolution's shadow persisted. Prosperity bred consumption, and consumption bred pollution. By the 1970s, rivers in America caught fire from chemical waste. The climate, once stable, began to shift, and politically, a new storm gathered. The Civil Rights era in the 60s was a signal to America that things had changed. America truly became one of the freest peoples on earth. But those opposed to that freedom weren't giving up without a fight. The modern Republican Party's anger and division are not new phenomena. They are echoes of Reconstruction, when white supremacists undermined black political power with terror and propaganda. The 1950s brought McCarthyism, weaponizing fear of communism against intellectual freedom and dissent. Ronald Reagan, the great communicator, also became the great deregulator, stripping away protections for workers and the environment, and stoking racial resentment with coded language about welfare queens. The Bush dynasty pushed militarism and corporate cronyism, widening the gulf between rich and poor. And finally, Donald Trump, not a disruption, but the logical culmination of decades of grievance politics, authoritarian flirtations, and anti-intellectualism. According to the Brookings Institution, Trump's second term would dismantle institutional checks, gut environmental policy, and politicize justice. All of this while climate change accelerates, democracy erodes, and the oligarchs, Musk, Bezos, and others, tighten their grip. The world watches as America teeters. Under Trump, alliances fray, autocrats rise, and misinformation flourishes. Europe accelerates climate action. China invests in global infrastructure. Meanwhile, America retreats into culture wars and conspiracy theories. The IPCC warns, we have less than a decade to avoid climate catastrophe. But Trump and his enablers scoff. The industrial might that once built civilization could now destroy it. The Renaissance was not born from comfort, but from catastrophe. It taught us that rebirth is possible, but only if we embrace reason, knowledge, and compassion. The question we face today is simple. Will we honor that legacy, or will we let ignorance rule again? Thank you for watching. Our channel, known as the Renaissance Spirit, is dedicated to the pursuit of a just, equitable, and humanitarian world, and to empower modern polymaths, thinkers, creators, and compassionate leaders through the pursuit of virtue, reason, and compassion. Our content explores history, politics, religion, personal development, society, culture, social and environmental justice, and yes, ancient Rome, whose rise and fall echoes eerily in our own time. Living the Renaissance spirit means treating history as a living dialogue, not a dusty past. It means facing the future with courage and wisdom. Will our descendants thank us or curse us for our omissions and cowardice? Will we leave them a world of opportunity or of ruin? The future isn't written, but our choices are the ink. The Renaissance ushered in a golden age of discovery, inquiry, and the pursuit of truth. That spirit must live on, not just as a philosophy, but as a way of life. I'd love to hear your reflections. What do you believe we owe the future? There's no greater legacy than wisdom passed forward, and no greater failure than silence in the face of decline. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. Then take our quiz to see if you live the Renaissance spirit, a philosophy for facing deep questions about identity, self-discovery, ethics, current affairs, AI, climate change, and legacy. Live the Renaissance spirit. History has not died, and neither has our responsibility to shape it.